So this is the second half of cutting the rust out of the Suzuki. Last week is when I chopped the panel out and put a new one in. This week I'm going to fill it with body filler and put some primer on it and paint it. So I've got some body filler here to fill up the all the little divots. So I usually would go a little bit less than a little bit more, because like this stuff hardens really quick, so you don't really have much leeway between getting it on and it hardening and unusable. So you put a little bit down, that should be enough, maybe a little bit more for my bits, maybe a little bit less, about that much for what I'm using, and then I can just slowly go over it every now and then. Once it hardens, I can go back over and fill in all the little pinholes at this one bit left. And with the hardener, I usually just put a bit of a pretty thick bead along it, about that. Doesn't really matter, but it's always better to, and then you just spread it out. Once it's all a uniform colour, I'll collect it all up on my little spatula, bring it over to where I'm filling, and you just want to squeeze it in. Now on your little plastic thing here, don't bother wiping it off. If you've got enough on there, just let it dry hard, really hard, and then you can just bend this. This is pliable enough, and you just crack it and you can just peel it off. This is what I mean about the bog. There's a fair bit on there now, but you can see you just usually can crack it or just peel it off like that, easy. And then there's nice clean, takes everything with it. Now that our body filler's dried nice and hard, this is the first layer I've put on. I've got some 120 grit. You probably should use a bit finer than this, but this one will be right for now. Now you want to follow all the body lines. You don't want to be digging into one spot or leaving one spot, so you just want to follow the body lines around and go nice and flat. Now you can see where the high spots are here. There's a bit there, there's a little high spot there, so I'm just slightly dip that in. The rest is pretty good. There's a few little pinholes. You can tell there's a low spot just in there. So just there's a low spot. There's a high spot there. There's another low spot just in there. You can feel it usually. There's another low spot in there. So they're the spots that you need to really fill up with bog. And then sand it back down, get it flat again. There's the hole just there. That's got to be filled up as well. Low spot in there as well. So they're the main spots you've got to focus on. You don't want to put too much on the high spots, because then you'll just be working twice as hard to get them down. So in the low spots here, you can see all this is pretty the same and smooth, but in the low spots you can see it's quite pitted, and that's where it was the body filler didn't quite fill it up. So that's where we've got to aim there, and up the top here. Fill that little pinhole, which was just an issue when I was welding. And as you can see, there's a bit there, and then once we've done that, we'll move on to this side here. So I've put a few more coats on this, just some thin ones of body filler, just so I can follow the body lines. I've feathered the edges out, and I've been sanding it down with 120 grit just to get it back to this. Then I'm going to go 240, and then I'm going to put some primer on there. So I've had to wait for the weather to warm up a bit, because paint doesn't really like drying when it's cold. It takes ages and it goes a bit funny when it does actually dry. So how I'm going to be putting it on is with a brush. I'm not going to spray it on, because it's a pain to clean the gun for such a small area. You know, it's only that big, so if I was doing the whole back end, I'd use the gun. But it's just going to be painted on today. So pop the tin of your paint. So we're just going to give it a stir. You just put about as much as you need. Remember, you've got to put thinners in as well. So get a bit of thinners. Just pour that in. And you want it as so the paint just runs off your tip of whatever you're mixing it with. That could be a bit thin there. So grab some wax and grease remover, put it in a cloth or whatever, and then just wipe it down, get rid of any contaminants on there. So let that just evaporate for what, 30 seconds, a minute, and then we can get to painting. So we've let that evaporate. Now we're just going to get a bit of paint and just brush it on. So that's the first coat. Now we're just going to sand it down. Don't have to go too much. Just bring it back a little bit. That should be right. Now we'll just chuck another coat on after we do the wax and grease. So the third coat's on. I've sanded it down with first 120, then I went to 320, and then I went to like 1,000 because that's the next step I had up. I've got this, it's a Actel Automotive paint, but it's the closest colour I can get without having to actually get the colour for the Suzuki mixed. So that's the colour I'm going to be painting this. You can see what it's like there. That was my test. It's not too far off, but it's better than this weird house paint blue that I put on there. So it's the same process for here as we did for the primer. You just got to wax and grease remove it and then put this on. So I've just got some old plastic bags and stuff like that, and I've just kind of taped it off with that electrical tape just so it doesn't go too far onto the other panel. It doesn't really bother me, but I don't want heaps of overspray, so just a little bit of prep there, and this is all prepped, so we just got to spray it on. Knock the top off and hold it about 150 to 200 mil away and just light dusts. There we go. Now we'll just let that one dry and then come back in, I don't know, say half an hour or so, or however long the can says, and put another coat on. So like, you could always get it more perfect than this. There's quite a few little pinholes, but you're not going to see it on the inside here. That doesn't really matter. The outside is what matters. So yeah, it's pretty good on the outside. The inside's a little bit, and that body line just there isn't as hard. I didn't quite get the bog right on that, but you know, all in all, it's pretty good. So that's pretty much done. You know, it's come a long way from being all eaten out in there, all rusted away, looking quite horrible on the inside, to this like repaired body panel that looks much better.